Hey people of God, thanks for clicking on this video. Now it's been a little while since I made a video. Some people are like texting me and like, we need more videos, and I would love to make more, but it's been really busy the last month. We just moved, actually. I'm sitting on the front porch of our new home. If it's a little loud, there might be some there's some music playing and some people talking and stuff like that, but hopefully my voice will be a little bit louder than the background. I think also if you could pray for me just about like the video making. I still feel a little bit like awkward making the videos, I guess. I much rather do preaching or teaching in person, so video still feels a little weird for me. But yeah, if you could pray, I'll do my best to keep videos coming and just share as I have inspiration and have time, things like that. But thank you so much for watching. Here's what I want to do in this video today. I want to talk to you just a little bit about sin and godliness, some really important truths that we all as Christians need to know, and we need to be reminded of often about sin and godliness, because it's really easy to forget. Ishan was talking with a friend recently, and this friend was like, has been struggling with this certain sin for a long time, and it seems like this kind of temptation, desire is not going away, and the person is like, man, I've been fighting against this so long, I just want to kind of give into it and like walk into this sin and just try it and just kind of see like how it goes, you know. A lot of immature people that I talk with, a lot of like new believers or people that are thinking about coming into faith are like, I'll do more for God later because, you know, I want to enjoy myself right now. And I just want to break down a few ideas, like 4 points about sin and godliness. We're going to talk about the short-term effects of sin and godliness. 2, the short-term effects of sin, short-term effects of godliness. Then we're going to talk about the long-term effects of sin and the long-term effects of godliness. Here they are. These truths are all over the scriptures, but I'm just going to look at a few verses from Proverbs chapter 4. Here's what you need to know about sin and godliness. Whether you're young, whether you're old, these are some basic facts the scripture teaches over and over again. Here's the truth about sin. First of all, number 1, sin usually provides significant short-term pleasure. Let's start with that. I'm going to say it again. Some of you aren't sure I said that. Sin usually provides significant short-term pleasure. Okay, so like if you choose to sin, usually there's like a real intense pleasure that will come along with that sin. Whether it's like a sexual sin, a temptation you give into in the sexual area, whether it's connected with money and greed, whether it's just an issue of like cruelty, you know, saying something mean, lashing out at someone. There's this like satisfaction that usually goes along with sin. Sin is pleasurable for a time, as Hebrews 11:25 alludes to in the story of Moses and his faith. Sin really does bring pleasure. It really does feel good. You know, so we all see people that live kind of this sinful lifestyle, or maybe we see them in a certain season and it seems like they're having the time of their lives, right? It seems like everything is going so well for them, you know, like maybe you can think of someone in your life and you thought about how you were strained, but they gave into this sin and they were doing fine, and they were the quarterback of the football team, or they like married the really attractive wealthy husband or whatever, and that is like those things do happen. Those things are true. There are seasons, there are times. The short-term period can even be like a whole lifetime, right? Like you see some people living in sin for pretty much their whole life, and it seems like things are good. It seems like they're in this pleasure, this joy of sin, right? However, on the other hand, the short term of godliness is that godliness usually provides significant short-term pain. Yes, godliness usually provides significant short-term pain. What do I mean? I mean, like when you start to live godly, when you start to do what's right, or when you from your youth or at any point in your life start to set your heart to do what's right, pain usually follows, right? Persecution comes, all kinds of attacks of the enemy happens, the difficulty of self-discipline, the difficulty of self-control, the difficulty of losing friends or relationship, the difficulty of oppression. Think of so many people in the scriptures, right, that like chose to live a godly life, and pain was like the most immediate result. Think about David. David was anointed to be king when he was a young man. He went up into the palace after he killed Goliath. He was playing the harp for Saul, and then Saul turned against him. And David ran from Saul for like years, right? Out in the wilderness, no place to lay his head, leading this band of misfits around the desert. And like he could have killed Saul several times. Like he could have risen up against Saul, he could have ended it, but that would have been sin for David. David's like, I'm not going to strike the Lord's anointed. I won't lay my hand on God's man. And so David's continued to walk in godliness, and his choice to be godly, his choice not to rise up against Saul, not to take matters into his own hands, not to use his own strength to end the difficulty by sinning, produced a lot of pain, a lot of short-term pain, right? Maybe you in your own life have been trying to live for the Lord, or maybe you're in a season, you're in a moment right now where it's like, God, I'm living for you. I'm trying to do things right. Why is it so hard? Sometimes living for Jesus, like, it's difficult. It's bitter. It's painful, you know? I think of a man, Richard Wurmbrand, who was the founder of Voice of the Martyrs. He was tortured for his faith for like 14 years, you know? They're like bitter, sad things that happen to the people of God. Sometimes it's for a month or a year. Sometimes it's for decades. Sometimes it seems like godly people have an entire lifetime of difficulty, of pain. But what happens in the end? What happens in the long term? The long-term story is this, that ultimately sin, though it gives short-term pleasure, sin ultimately provides: 1, sin usually provides significant short-term pleasure. 2, godliness usually provides significant short-term pain. But 3, sin ultimately provides long-term pain. Sin ultimately provides long-term pain. Sin is a descent, where you start up here, where you sin and like you gain some advantage, or you gain some momentary high, or maybe you're really strategic and it lasts a long time, but you descend into pain. You start with pleasure, you descend into pain. But godliness, though it produces short-term pain, though it breaks your heart, though it breaks your bank, though it leaves you out in the wilderness sometimes, godliness is an ascent. Godliness begins at the low point. It begins in pain. It might stay there for years. It might be pretty much a whole lifetime. It could be an entire lifetime. But godliness ends in the high place. Godliness leads to peace and blessing and exaltation. Sin leads to immediate pleasure, but it leads to long-term pain. Godliness leads to immediate pain, but long-term pleasure. Long-term pleasure in the end. Proverbs 4, verses 18 and 19 say this. It says, "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn. It shines brighter and brighter until the full day. But the path of the wicked is like the darkness. They do not know what they stumble over." Brothers and sisters, here is the truth. Sin is pleasurable for a season, but in the end, it leads to death. Godliness is painful for a season, but in the end, it leads to life. Choose not to walk in the pleasures of sin. Young person, old person, tired Christian, new Christian. Choose not to walk in the pleasures of sin, but to endure the difficulty of godliness, to gain the ultimate pleasure of God's blessing, to be at peace with Him. Even those who spend their entire lives in suffering, one day will be in God's glory. And godliness is the means to ultimate pleasure. Thanks for watching.